Breaking news, Blake Griffin. Hey world, what up? Breaking news, Blake Griffin and the Brooklyn Nets are now coming together and to form themselves a partnership into where they are looking to add more depth and chase an NBA championship. This was huge breaking news in the NBA as pretty much the first was the James Harden trade. That orchestration pretty much brought into a big three with Brooklyn. When you had Kyrie Irving, you did have Kevin Durant, now James Harden. And within a month to two later, we've seen now Blake Griffin on the Brooklyn Nets. You know, whenever we saw DeAndre Jordan, Kyrie, and KD join forces together in Brooklyn, I would have never thought, mostly like you guys, that James Harden, let alone Blake Griffin, 2 to 3 former All Stars, let alone current, that would join this team via trade, let alone signings, and have these pretty much all NBA pass in the former to where they're at as of right now. So the Brooklyn Nets are pretty much 8 to 9 deep on formidable veterans, let alone consistent players. And Blake Griffin pretty much adds onto that chain of things. The Detroit Pistons, of course, they bought him out. And the Pistons are going another direction. I'm not going to focus too much on them. We've already seen last season they let go and bought out Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond. And pretty much they're trying to ride the wave of Jeremy Grant, who's been averaging around 23, 24 a game this season, and who was pretty much a bubble player that could have potentially been an all-star. And also they brought in Dennis Smith Jr., but the Pistons, I can care less about them. More focused on the Brooklyn Nets. Steve Nash has already stated that Blake Griffin will be coming off the bench to be that quote-unquote 5, let alone to be a center for them. Looks like they are going to run a starting lineup of Kyrie Irving at the 1. At the 2, you are going to have James Harden. Let me backtrack on that because James Harden's actually been taking on the point guard responsibility and Kyrie at the 2, as Kyrie stated within an interview. So Harden's been leading the league in assists. He is the point guard. Kyrie is at the 2, or a combo guard if you can kind of play along with that. At the 3, you do have Joe Harris. At the 4, when Kevin Durant will be healthy, he will be at the 4. And at the 5, they are going to run DeAndre Jordan. Now, they just stated that Blake Griffin will be coming off the bench to be their 5, but I can see Steve Nash kind of flip things up to where they can have more of a traditional lineup of having James Harden, Kyrie, KD, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan all together. I think that's more formidable, but they are lacking a true center, so they may have to force Blake Griffin to come off the bench, which seems like to be the case. But the Brooklyn Nets, they had their eye also on an Andre Drummond, a JaVale McGee, and any other current buyouts for any of these center players out there. So looks like Andre Drummond will be bought out, but the Lakers will be targeting him first. That's going to be up for grabs because the Nets and Lakers are in true need for another big on their franchise. JaVale McGee would also be formidable for either of those franchises as well. And I'm pretty shocked right now that Boogie Cousins has not been picked up, but the Nets and Lakers need more of a defensive anchor, so they're going to hold off to, if they can't get any of those other cats, they're going to go over for Boogie Cousins, if anything, on that, if anything. The Nets right now have a pretty formidable and legitimate roster. They will be coming out of the Eastern Conference, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure every one of us can agree on that, and we're going to see a battle of the LA Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets in the NBA Finals. That's what I've had pretty much down with for a couple months, and I mean, it's still looking like to be the way. I mean, NBA ratings will be jumping up substantially from a downfall from the 2020 NBA Finals with the Heat and Lakers, which were pretty atrocious. But the Brooklyn Nets right now, they could probably add another big on their team. If it's JaVale McGee, Boogie Cousins, or Andre Drummond, they should be set. And they could really use another third point guard on their franchise. But since Spencer Dinwiddie is out for the season, you are looking at Kyrie and James Harden with those responsibilities. And a couple of times, Tyler Johnson, let alone Landry Shamet, could kind of run those. But if anything, if there's any other free agents, you should probably pick up Quinn Cook, who just got waived by the LA Lakers, who has championship experience with the Warriors, let alone the Lakers, and he would be a good veteran fit for their franchise. For another big, I already listed everything else. They're pretty much kind of set as can be. I've been kind of talking too much into here, so let's kind of jump into the Brooklyn Nets and Blake Griffin's acquisition together in partnership and how this affects the rest of the league in the NBA.
Back with us now for Sard. Are the Brooklyn Nets the clear-cut favorites to win the title after signing Blake?
All right. So are the Brooklyn Nets the favorites? The Brooklyn Nets are not the favorites to win the NBA championship on my end. Now, I can get it for any other one's perspective. The Brooklyn Nets have won pretty much 8 out of the last 9 ball games. James Harden's been pretty much entering in the conversation for top 3 in the MVP voting race, as he's handled the responsibility of being a point guard, handling the impact of Kevin Durant being out 8 to 9 games. The Brooklyn Nets have been on a tier. They're number 1 in power rankings, and you just brought in Blake Griffin. So the Blake Griffin now new Brooklyn Nets, they should be favored to win the Eastern Conference by a long shot, by anything. I mean, if you're looking at these other teams in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, that's not going to be a true threat if you're looking to a playoff series with the Brooklyn Nets. If you're looking with the Boston Celtics, they've been very inconsistent. Brooklyn's going to have their number. And then you do have anyone else is going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. That's looking like the trending Eastern Conference Finals opponent and matchup to be the case. Now that series, I pretty much would pick 6 games for the Brooklyn Nets to overcome the Philadelphia 76ers. And you got to realize, again, the Nets are only half a game away from the first seed in the Eastern Conference. So they're looking up to the Philadelphia 76ers by a good margin. And you do have Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, who are going to be out for the next couple of games due to COVID protocols. So the Nets have been an upward trending transition. On my end, I do have the LA Lakers coming out of the Western Conference. And big picture, I'll go a little more deep into things, but the LA Lakers will be coming out of the Western Conference, let alone winning the NBA championship. Now, this is still part of LeBron James's glorified years. The Anthony Davis injury is a diversion, a way to pretty much put LeBron James at a lower level. Same thing with the LA Lakers. So everyone can focus more on the Brooklyn Nets, let alone the Philadelphia 76ers, and as well as the Utah Jazz in the Western Conference. And that's what the downplay with the NBA is going to have to do as of right now. The LA Lakers, long story short, when it comes to the playoffs with a healthy Anthony Davis, and the Lakers will be getting another defensive anchor on their team. If this is either Boogie, JaVale McGee, Andre Drummond, they will be getting one of those 3, and they should be set.
Look, I am high on the Nets, but Brandon Marshall's just going a little bit too far. I mean, you're a little too excited about this signing. They are the clear-cut favorites in the East, obviously. I'm not going to go clear-cut favorites overall. I think that's disrespectful to the Lakers, especially, well, not especially, but with a healthy Anthony Davis. And this is not yet a Kevin Durant on the Warriors situation, where it's just a foregone conclusion. And the key is not Blake Griffin. The key is over this.
And we're looking at Kevin Durant in his career. The times he's won championships have been on super teams. And I've stated Kevin Durant will be winning an NBA championship with the Brooklyn Nets. I've always stated I thought it would be just with DeAndre Jordan and Kyrie Irving as being the main core players. I did not expect the James Harden mega trade to go down with, let alone a Blake Griffin signing. Now, Blake Griffin, if he's going to re-sign with the Nets or not, that's to be determined. He could get paid somewhere elsewhere, so that's up in the air. I'm not going to go that far, not go that deep. The Brooklyn Nets, as my state, they will be either winning the 2022 NBA championship or the 2023. Now, I've always had the Lakers going back to back. That's still been in plan, still been in place. I've had good thoughts about the Lakers could be potentially three-peating, but I don't know. It's too hard ever since the James Harden trade went down since they have a big 3, to where they would not win an NBA championship. They have to. And if the Brooklyn Nets are not winning this year, which they won't, it's hard for me to say they won't be winning the next following year, especially in the offseason, which they're going to make some formidable roster moves and changes. So as of right now, I'm kind of leaning towards the Brooklyn Nets winning the championship in 2022. It will not be against the LA Lakers. I'm going to take things a little more step-by-step upon this, but yeah.
Second half of the season, can we get the 3 superstars on the court together? They've only played 7 games together, and I do think Kevin Durant is going to fit in seamlessly when he comes back. but I got to see it. I want to see 25 games with the big three together over the second half of the season. Now, let me get to Blake. This was the greatest move for Blake Griffin. If he had gone to a Miami, a Portland, a team that expected him to come in and actually do something, like make a difference, it would have been a disappointment because he's not that guy anymore.
NBA fans are always two-dimensional thinkers, and they're far-fetched. They said the same thing with Carmelo Anthony when they said he was washed and done with no other franchise in the NBA. Who else did they say it with? I just forgot the cat's name. They said the same thing with Dwight Howard, and I've always been highly on those two players. They have to play on contenders, teams that will have them on a user role basis. And the same thing with Blake Griffin. He's not washed in the NBA. The Detroit Pistons, they're a mess. And they're one of the bottom teams in the Eastern Conference. I did not even expect them to make the Eastern Conference playoffs. So as Blake Griffin being his fourth season with the Pistons, it's a drag. Your momentum, your mentality is not there. Now, which is going to give him resurgence, is going to a contender. So him being bought out, being a free agent, of course he's going to go to the Brooklyn Nets. They need another big. They are a trending team in the East. He will have a big user role. Kind of like the Dwight Howard in 2020, but more kind of glorified. And within that, he's going to play with a bunch of all-stars. It was a great move for him. The Lakers could have been somewhat of another situation, but the Lakers need a true dominant defensive anchor. We're talking about JaVale McGee over here or Andre Drummond. Blake Griffin would have been kind of forced on that.
But in Brooklyn, would have been similar in LA, but in Brooklyn, the three stars are drawing so much attention. He is going to get so many open buckets that it's going to be great for him. He doesn't help your defense, obviously, so that's still something they have to work on. But here's the deal. Best case scenario, he's Dwight Howard last year with the Lakers. No expectations.
Hey, bingo. What did I say?
Just don't rock the boat. Play your role, hustle, all that, and you get major credit. Worst case scenario is if Bruce Brown and Jeff Green are playing more minutes than Blake because of their hustle, their defense, whatever, and he's like, I'm Blake Griffin, and he's upset about it, and he's despondent. That could become a negative. I think they'd probably just get rid of him. That'd be the worst case scenario. I don't see it happening, but I think Blake will come in, play a good role. DeAndre Jordan's his boy, and it helps him, but this isn't the difference. Win or lose the title is not going to be based on Blake Griffin.
The most notable thing for Brandon's beloved Nets is that Blake Griffin clearly thinks they're the best chance to win the title because he could have gone anywhere, I think, and he said, no, Brooklyn's where I want to go, but... And Wilds and Broussard are going to get annoyed with me because they hate nothing more than when I present them with cold, inarguable facts. But this is just another instance and another example of what happens to the NBA in response to LeBron James winning a title. So let me take you down a quick little path here, if you will. So in 2007, LeBron didn't win a title, but he carried that terrible Cavs team to the finals. And what did the NBA do? Big three in Boston. Assemble. We got to do something because this guy's going to take over the league. And it worked. They won a title. And then LeBron won his first title in Miami. And what happened? Steve Nash, Dwight Howard, Kobe Bryant. Get together. We got to do something. They're never going to be. Now, that one didn't work, but that is what happened. Remember, it was at the cover of Sports Illustrated. Then LeBron won a title in 2016. And what happened? Kevin Durant and Steph Curry got together. Draymond's crying on the phone. They're like, guys, boys, do we ever want to win again? We better get together. And then LeBron James won a title last year, knocking James Harden out of the playoffs while Kevin Durant was watching from injury. And what happened? KD and Harden were like, boys, I think we got to come together. because this guy's going to win all the titles. And Blake Griffin saw it too and was like, hey, I'll join them as well. So listen, it's just part of the story. We knew it was coming. I didn't know it would come in this form of Harden going to the Nets, Blake Griffin forcing Detroit going to the Nets as well. But it just adds to the legacy and the story of the modern NBA Wilds, which is super teams assembling in response to what LeBron has done the previous year. I see you guys shaking your heads. I laid the...
And to add on to that, LeBron James's career at the end of the day with his legacy, if he gets 6 championships or not, I mean, I pretty much stated, I expect LeBron James to tie Michael Jordan with 6 championships. Now, the detrimental side to the GOAT argument will be his 6 NBA Finals losses. How's LeBron James going to overcome that? By being the GOAT. Well, that is due to LeBron James having quality championships against super teams, defeating a 73-9 team, let alone defeating a Big 3, Big 4 with the Brooklyn Nets.
History out for you perfectly there.
It's not bad.
But
It's not
I
bad.
root for Blake. I hope Blake does well.
comment.
I like Blake. Yeah, go ahead, Wild.
I
You
am
let
rooting
Bruce
for Blake
Sarver start.
too. I think the super team you're talking about is the Warriors. Because I'm rooting for Blake, and I have fond memories of Lob City, and the fact that Blake got decided, oh, you're going to be here forever. Here's where your number's going to be retired. By the way, we're sending you to Detroit. I think, although Blake is like great vibes guy, I do think there's a little bit of like, you know what? I want Brandon's pick. I want Nets versus Nets versus Clippers. I want Blake to win. But here's the thing, Broussard. The Blake that we remember fondly, we're so far away. I saw this stat the other day, and I was like, the guy hasn't dunked once. Not even 72 was not a lot. He was dunking, way more than that when he won the dunk contest. But I would like to see him get one dunk. I don't need one a game, just one. And I think this is the most indicative stat of how his game has changed.
And Blake Griffin made the perfect decision joining the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, pretty much if you're looking at the top 3 teams for him on his standings was going to be the Nets at 1, the Lakers at 2, and at the 3, you're probably maybe the Miami Heat, something along those lines. But, I mean, he's not going to join the 76ers. They already got enough bigs with Embiid, then Dwight Howard off the bench. The Milwaukee Bucks, he's not going to join Milwaukee. It's a fit of things. It's not going to happen. The Boston Celtics are pretty much have been a dumpster fire mess the beginning to the middle of the season, sitting a little over 500. He's not going to join that mess. And everything else in the Eastern Conference has been, they're not true contenders. He wants to go to a contender. If you're looking at the West, he's not going to join the Utah Jazz. The Phoenix Suns would have been somewhat interesting, but he's not going to do that. The Blazers could have been somewhat interesting as they have a bunch of their big guys hurt with Zach Collins and Nurkic, but at the end of the day, Brooklyn was the way to go. They like to run small. They need another big on their team. And playing with James Harden, Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and playing alongside with DeAndre Jordan once again, that's the best move for Blake Griffin. Now, his expectations are to sacrifice his role to pretty much try to win a championship, which the Brooklyn Nets have a high percentage of doing so. They will come out of the East. I do not expect them to win the championship. They will, and let me repeat myself, they will go against the LA Lakers in the 2021 NBA Championship, not the LA Clippers. I fully expect the Lakers against the Nets in the finals to go 7 games. It's not going 6. We already saw that with the Miami Heat last season. In the NBA, they never keep it consistent when it comes to NBA Finals amount of games for each exhibition. So, for example, we pretty much see in the NBA in 2015 that went 6 games. In 2016, that went 7 games. The next following year, it went 5 games. It went 4 games. It went 6 games. It went 6 games. And now within here, I'm fully expecting the NBA to bring in another Game 7. We pretty much see a Game 7 once every 4 to 5 years or so in the NBA Finals. So, if anything, to put a Game 7, why not the LA Lakers, who won a championship defending against a super team, the Brooklyn Nets? You got to remember, Space Jam 2 is about to come out a week after the NBA Finals, which, funny enough, LeBron James stars to go against the Monstars. The NBA has scripts. They have this in the background. Why do you think James Harden joined the Nets? Now Blake Griffin. I would not be shocked if Andre Drummond joined to be their starting center with the Brooklyn Nets to complete that monster starting five.
I'm going to add something to that, Wilds. He's the only player in the NBA who's 6'7" or taller with 150 shot attempts or more who hasn't had a dunk. The only player.
Wow.
Think about that. Blake Griffin, one of the greatest game dunkers ever. Let me get back to Nick. And look, I love LeBron almost as much as you, Nick, but I remain objective. And you left something out of your little narrative. That LeBron went to Miami with the ultimate super team. What are you talking about? He didn't just win it in Miami.
And this notion that LeBron James had the ultimate super team, his era with the Miami Heat, is far-fetched. The only time LeBron James had an unfair super team to pretty much had to win the championship due to the talent was the 2011 Miami Heat. No one else was on that same stratosphere mentally or prepared whenever Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and LeBron James joined forces together, and with veteran players who took veteran minimum contracts. No team mentally was there. They never thought that could ever happen. Number two, they were not prepared. They were frozen and shocked. Now, the Heat did choke those finals. Won't get too deep into there. But in 2012, 2013, 2014, the Miami Heat were still the favorite team in the NBA to win the championship, but it was not by a long shot. These teams were pretty much not neck to neck, but they were pretty close up there with the Miami Heat. Now, if we're looking into the Kevin Durant Golden State Warriors, those Warriors teams were head over heels from any other competition. It was laughable. Not with the Miami Heat. Only in 2011.
Miami wanted Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh.
They had missed
Then
the
Kevin
playoffs.
Love and Kyrie Irving were a super team as well.
They had
with
missed the
LeBron.
playoffs.
No, sir. The Cleveland Cavaliers with Kyrie Irving, LeBron James, and Kevin Love were not a super team. When they first formed together, first it was LeBron James joining Kyrie Irving in Cleveland. Now, Minnesota star player Kevin Love did acknowledge that if he were to get traded, it had to be the Cavaliers or he was leaving and he's not joining the Minnesota Timberwolves to re-sign. So it's pretty much up in the air that everyone knew that it was going to be those three. Even when they did form, their bench and roster were not ideal whatsoever. I mean, you had Dion Waiters out there. You had... Who else you had out there? You had Dion Waiters. You had Anderson Varejao. And Sean Marion. Kind of a bunch of no names and guys who were about to retire, if anything. Those Cleveland Cavaliers team with that big three, quote unquote, they were not a super team. They were not even expected to win the Eastern Conference and come out. The Chicago Bulls were with Jimmy Butler, Pau Gasol, and Derrick Rose. The Chicago Bulls, they were expected to come out of the East. And then we did see the resurgence of the Atlanta Hawks, who had that 60-game winning record with 4 All-Stars with Jeff Teague, Paul Millsap, Al Horford, and Kyle Korver. The Cleveland Cavaliers finally got their act together midway when they brought in a trade for J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert, and Timothy Mozgov as well from the Denver Nuggets. But they were not a super team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. They were not.
It just wasn't the best super team. That was a super team, though. Kevin Love was putting up Moses Malone numbers in Minnesota. I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, LeBron went to
and
two
Anthony
teams that
Davis
have been
and
out of the
LeBron is a
playoffs.
super team. I'm just saying,
Anthony
you act
Davis
like
had
LeBron
won
has
one
been
playoff
winning it by
series.
himself. No super team.
No, I didn't say
on,
that.
man.
I'm just saying how the
All
league.
right.
All right, overall, the Brooklyn Nets, they will be coming out of the Eastern Conference. It was pretty much confirmed and clarified on my side of things when James Harden was traded in that mega trade. Now adding in Blake Griffin, it's going to have the momentum and trend. I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks and the 76ers, they're going to give some good fighting chances, but they're not going to be a true threat for the Brooklyn Nets. And the Boston Celtics, they've been out of the play, so I'm not going to jump into them. The Nets, they will be representing the East. Now it just comes to the question, who will they be facing in the NBA Finals? It will be the LA Lakers, and due to that, LeBron James will be winning his 5th NBA championship. I fully expect that to go 7 games, and right after that, Space Jam 2 comes out. Perfect timing of things for LeBron's glorified years. His legacy, the GOAT argument to defeat the quote-unquote Monstars and one of the greatest teams, All-Stars assembled all time. It's all in the narrative. So, I know it's early on things. You guys will see as we kind of go forward from there, but good move for Brooklyn. They need another big. I fully expect more players to get bought out. let's see how these players like George Hill, for example, JaVale McGee, Andre Drummond, so on and so forth, what contenders they choose and how we're going to be wrapping up entering the NBA playoffs.